I recently had the pleasure of catching up with MLS enthusiast, radio and podcast host Jason Davis. He currently hosts a show on Cyrus XM, and he also runs a podcast with his friend called the JD and Rod Show. It's hilarious. Trust me. Go and watch it. We spoke for everything from the new MLS development plan to equal pay in the US team. We spoke about which youngsters he's most excited about seeing coming from the US and representing the US. We also spoke about the Bundesliga, and I promised the next time we chat that I'd have a UK team for him. Maybe you can help me decide. But let's see what we had to say.
Cool. I just got a few questions. We're going to sort of go a bit of everywhere today.
Yeah, sure.
We'll start off with the MLS Elite Player Development Platform. Just got launched.
Oh,
I saw
yeah.
it. I've been doing my homework. It's massive. It's exciting. It looks like they're gathering together all regions so it's not saturated, and then sort of finding the best player from the area. Would you like to explain it better than me? I'm sure you can.
Well, look, I mean, I would love for the United States to be in a position like England or France or Germany, where we have a network of clubs, where we have community clubs that do the work of finding the players. Now, I mean, look, it doesn't happen that often, but obviously the dream is some lad gets plucked out. He plays for his local club. You know, he's in they're in the conference, or they're not even they're not even professional or even dreaming of being professional. They're semi-pro, whatever it is. And, he gets identified, and then one day Manchester United comes calling and he ends up playing at Old Trafford. That's the dream, right? We don't have that structure in place in the United States because we just don't have the clubs that are old enough, that have the standing, that have the money, that have the resources. Players, for the most part, don't gravitate towards those kind of environments. We don't have academies like that. So, what existed, and it's been years and years and years of trying to figure out how to do this right, but everybody wants to get their hands on it and try to make it what they think is the right way to do it. So this is just the latest attempt. I mean, I don't want to be cynical and say it can't work or it can't do a better job of what came before it, but I won't know unless we spend a couple years seeing if Major League Soccer can take. Look, I do think it's good that the professional clubs are taking on the responsibility of trying to set up a national system that will be more efficient at giving opportunities for these players. But it's a big country. It spans thousands upon thousands of miles. So getting games at that level for all of these players, that's the hard part. That's what they got to figure out.
Yeah, well, it seems like they're trying, and that's one thing that you got to love about America, when they grab it with both hands and they're trying to find out a way to be the best, and you can't knock that at all, man.
No. And again, Major League Soccer has made an effort to invest in development, and that's a luxury for us. When the entire culture is built around kicking a ball, when you're knee high to your dad and you start kicking a ball, it's easier to let the process sort of play out so that players kind of arrive on your doorstep. I mean, everybody's looking, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But for a lot of clubs around the world, it kind of takes care of itself. That's how it happens for American football, for baseball, for basketball teams. They don't have to do the work. Other systems carry that weight for them. Obviously, in soccer and football, you don't have that luxury in the United States. So MLS has to go out and spend the money. They have to take the responsibility of doing this. And if they say they can, well, then let's give them a shot to see. Let's see if they're willing to put in the effort and make the sacrifices necessary and spend the money, because we're talking about millions of dollars on this.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the part. Because it's a sport that's sort of it's trying to sort of make its way over there. Like you said, there's no background to it. The sport was we've had it in England for years and years and years. So, like you said, the small clubs, then they get a reputation and build. You haven't got that. So, apart from them going to the actual clubs and going for the actual academies, it's a good way to start. It's a good way to start, man.
Yeah, it's just again when we talk about youth soccer and the development. I mean, because first of all, there's obviously a lot of players who aren't ever going to be professional, and they're sort of a different set of people that you worry about. Like, you want to make sure that soccer is governed well, so they have a good experience, so they get everything out of football that they want. But if you're talking about players who are on a track to maybe be professionals, who are that talented, finding a way to get them games, make it so that they don't have to pay thousands of dollars just to get that opportunity, because that's always been the issue in the United States, is that we don't have professional clubs carrying the burden of the cost. So then, there's a youth club, a football club in the middle of the country, and they do a great job of developing players, but it costs $5,000 a year to play with them. And because they got to pay their coaches, they got to pay their travel fees, everything else. Again, big country, got to go all over the place to get games. So then if you have someone who comes from a family who doesn't have the means to pay for that, are we doing enough to give those players opportunities? Who's picking up the bill? Do we have a system that identifies those players and says, okay, you're somebody who deserves an opportunity? Who's going to fund all of this? That kind of thing. And again, Major League Soccer taking on that burden is great. That's what we need. Or it's a step in the right direction. Yeah. And we do have a second division here that's getting bigger and bigger. And although we don't move clubs between first and second division, those clubs are interested in developing their own players. So they've started an academy initiative. A lot of those clubs do have academies. So that's, covering more of the map in the country.
Yeah. How big is football amongst the youth now, or soccer amongst the youth now in America? Is it growing? Is it there? Because that's the important thing.
Well, kid, if I was a youth, I could tell you, but I'm not. I'm just not a youth anymore. No. I think that it's more just sort of accepted as one of many sports. Now, when I grew up, there was no presence for the game in the country. I played as I played youth soccer. I loved it. I actually did.
Any good?
I could cross. I was 8, 9, 10. I was a decent athlete, but also I was playing in the middle of the country. I didn't get to see anybody play on television. I had no heroes. Okay. There was no, I didn't. If you asked me, I was a child of the 80s. So I was playing in the 80s. If you asked me back then, name a soccer player, I probably could have told you Pele, and that was it. No frame of reference. I think, it's mind blowing, right?
Wow.
Nothing was on television. We didn't have a professional league of our own. Mm-hmm. I was watching baseball and football and basketball, and I wanted to be Michael Jordan, and I wanted to be, Joe Montana, but I didn't have anybody in soccer, and it led me to kind of drift away from the sport. Mm-hmm. That obviously exists now. Television saturated with soccer in this country. There's an older generation who will never fully accept soccer as part of the sports that we care about in the United States, but most kids, most people under the age of, say, 30 are just kind of like, oh yeah, soccer, baseball, basketball, it's all part of the same thing. And so you walk down the street in any decent sized town and you're going to see jerseys. It's a mix. I mean, it's all over the map. It's Mexico, it's Messi, it's Ronaldo. Yesterday I walked by a house in my neighborhood, 2 little kids, maybe 7 and 4, playing playing a little bit of soccer in their backyard, pick up in their backyard.
Well, that's what we want. That answers my question.
Yes.
It's there. It's there.
No, it is. Absolutely. It depends on where you go, but it's definitely here. 100% it's here.
Yeah, well, I've not recently come back from Seattle, and I went and saw the Sounders game, and it's completely different atmosphere to in England. It's more of a family vibe. People come in, they walk around, they chat to someone over there, It's completely different, and I loved it. Yeah. And it felt like it was getting there. It felt like it was getting there. The fan. The one thing I will take is the fan who doesn't even watch the game. Watch the game when he's banging the drum.
So we're learning, right, Kira? We're learning here.
You're learning.
And I think there is a divide between, or not, maybe not a divide. There's a curve, right? There are people who are purists and love the game for the game on the field, and the atmospheres are part of it. I mean, I readily admit that I kind of fell back in love with soccer because I flipped on the Premier League, and hey, when they're singing in the terraces, it's really hard not to fall in love with that, right? Mm-hmm. But I know that we're not going to do it the same way, and I don't think we have to apologize for that. I mean, it's one thing I say, like, England does it the way England does it. I love it. But we don't have to do it exactly the same way in the United States. So, and every city has its own thing. Like, you went to Seattle. You go to LA, it's really different. You go to Atlanta, it's completely different. You go to Houston, you go to Chicago. All these places have their own little micro cultures, which I think is a fascinating part of it. But it's definitely, and again, it's sort of like there are younger people who are coming up with soccer as part of their lives, playing it and watching it on television. There's an older generation that have adopted it as their first love and maybe came to it later in life. And so maybe they're the ones who don't watch the game because they care more about singing in the stands. I'm not going to judge them because we need them to pass down the love of the club to their kids. We need that.
Exactly. No, and that's the point. this generation here, where it actually feels like it's here to stay, as opposed to before it was maybe a bit gimmicky, trying to get over here. It feels like it's actually real now. And that's leading to the next generation to pass that on, and then it will be more natural. It won't be something like you've read from a textbook, but it will be more natural. It'll be quality, man. So,
but that's a slow process, right? That's not something that happens,
and you can't force
overnight. No, you can't.
Force it.
But we're impatient, and we live in an era where everybody wants everything right now. And so, as a culture, as a society, forget just football, just soccer. As a society, we have an issue of not wanting to wait for things to develop. And then we complain, oh, that's not as good as I wanted it to be. It was like, well, yeah, that was 5 minutes ago you started. How is it possibly going to be that good? So and all of us are and so there's this constant push to like make things better, even though we haven't allowed the passage of time to really take things along a little bit.
I get it. Patience is key, people. Just be patient and it will come. Trust me. Football wasn't built in a day. It took years. I'm going to ask you about a couple of players. The obvious one, Giovanni Reina, Borussia Dortmund, top plays. It runs in the family. How good is he?
You know, look, if you can get your Bundesliga debut and your Champions League debut at 17, and for a club that went out and managed to convince Erling Haaland to play for them over United and all these other clubs, and obviously Dortmund isn't Bayern Munich, and it's going to be harder for them to win titles because of that. But I mean, come on, everybody except Liverpool right now is going to want to trade places with a club like Borussia Dortmund. You want your club to be like that. So that is obviously a credit to him. He had connections. Those helped. I mean, obviously he had an incredible pedigree. He's a legacy for us. I mean, we're certainly very proud to have a guy. Claudio Reyna could have played. I'm not saying he was good enough necessarily in his youngest days, but he could have played for Argentina. I mean, he was eligible for that. He could have held out for that. He always wanted to play for the United States. And there's been that question of whether or not Giovanni was going to represent the United States, or I think he's eligible, or on paper.
Are you worried?
England, Portugal, and Argentina, in addition to the United States. And I was like, oh, the Argentina's looking at him. Portugal's definitely monitoring. I heard England. I heard the FA was actually like, we're monitoring Giovanni Reina. It's like, no, get away.
No, of course we would be. Of course we would be. If you've even flown over England, we're trying to see if we can give you a cap. Look what we done to Wilfred Zaha. Well, gave him a game and then left him on the wayside. Was like, actually, no, we don't fancy her. So don't let England have him. Take him.
And he said he's going to play for the U.S. Look, I don't know how good he is because he's had so little time. I hope that with the Bundesliga coming back, that he's going to get some opportunities, and maybe even a start, because things are so compact with the fixture list. But we don't know. I mean, he needs to be tested. He needs to be in difficult situations. He seems mature enough. Again, he's got an incredible mentor in his father, who went to Europe as a young American when there were barely any Americans in Europe. So, he was dealing with stuff that Giovanni doesn't, because the respect is already there. And Christian Pulisic blazed a trail for him at Dortmund too. So I'm really high on him, but I also think that that's just me wanting him to be. Yeah. And as somebody asked, I just answered this question. Somebody said, "Is he going to be better than Pulisic?" I don't know. I think so, but I can't tell you.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think physically he's very impressive physically for a 17-year-old player. And we've never in the United States, we always have a problem marrying the physicality of a player to their technical ability. And clearly he's got the technical ability.
He has got that abundance.
Sky's the limit. Sky's the limit.
It is. One player you probably don't know a bit more about is Ezequiel Bako. He's been linked with Arsenal a bit. Do you reckon he's got what it takes to cut it in the Premier League?
I hadn't heard that Arsenal link.
Yeah.
Speaking of talking about different players. I mean, Giovanni Reina looks big when he plays. Ezequiel Barco is a tiny dude. He's a little guy. But he's an Argentine, so you kind of give him a pass on that. I like him. I think he buzzes around. He has a ton of energy. He plays with aggression, which I obviously think is key for the Premier League. I don't know if he can handle the physical nature of that.
Oh, it's the physical nature or the actual level of Arsenal?
Well, I mean, okay, there's that too. And his time in Atlanta, so he obviously was, I think he was Young Footballer of the Year coming out of South America at the time. He had played for, I want to say Independiente, but I might have that wrong. And they won the Copa Sudamericana. And, that's the second tier in South America. And I think he scored the penalty kick that won it for them. And obviously it's at 18 or 17 or whatever it was at the time. That's a pretty good level. And I think, look, MLS is a good league, but it's not, we recognize where it is in the hierarchy. I didn't expect him to struggle when he arrived in America, but he did. And maybe that's cultural too. And I think that's definitely something you have to think about with these players is they change their culture completely. They're moving from their home nation to a place like the US, to a place like the UK. How do they adapt to that? I don't know if you know about this. And I'm not saying anything anybody doesn't know. He caused a bit of controversy because he decided to mess around with a teammate's girlfriend. So
no,
yeah,
no.
Go look it up.
He done a John Terry.
Go look it up. Yeah, it happened. It happened 2018. I want to say 2018. He ended up at the doghouse. Didn't play much because of that at the time. Tata Martino was not having it. He did have a good year last year. He was much better, but he was also gone a lot because of U20s with Argentina and some other things. So I don't have a handle on how he's going to be if he steps up another level. I couldn't tell. Again, he plays with intent. He's quick. I think he's technical enough for the Premier League. It's just whether or not he could handle the physicality and maybe that extra level, because obviously things move so fast in the Premier League.
I watched him and I thought he was a little bit raw. I think there's a player in him. His energy's really good, which the Brits will love. They love energy. They love people that work with good work rate. But it was just
we took that. We borrowed that from you. We took that a lot.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. But he works really hard. He's not very good, but he works really hard.
It was like Clint Dempsey. He was like the hardest worker, run everywhere, shooting when he can. Loved him over here. We loved him over here.
Yeah.
What do you put down? There's quite a few top Americans coming through now. Pulisic, Reina, Taylor Adams. They're all coming through. Like you're looking like you're getting a bit of a squad. What do you put that down to? What the development? What do you put that down to?
I mean, look, whether or not this group of players kind of coalesces to be anything better than we've had, especially in the international level, I don't know yet. But I will say that it definitely seems as though we're pumping out a higher level of player at a younger age, right? Mm-hmm. So it used to be that American players ended up going to college and playing college soccer for 3 or 4 years. And by the time you get done with that, you're 22 and you're well behind the curve. And even though we made some good players, Claudio Reyna is a good example, played at the University of Virginia, Brian McBride, who played at Fulham, Dempsey, who you already mentioned. These guys all played college soccer. Who knows what those guys would have been if they had gone pro or been able to play in a professional environment at 17 or 18. Mm-hmm. So I just think that we are now, and clubs around the world are getting smarter about taking advantage of American talent, right? And so, for example, Schalke signed Weston McKennie straight out of Texas, didn't have to pay anything for him. Didn't even have to pay training compensation for him because of the way that American rules work. We weren't chasing after that at the time. So he was just free after being in the FC Dallas Academy. He was just free to leave for Schalke at the age of 18.
No compensation whatsoever.
No, it was no sign. He wasn't under contract because you can't sign a contract before you're 18 in the U.S. So he was just free to go to Schalke at 18. FC Dallas got nothing for him. Now, Major League Soccer has decided that they're going to chase training compensation for players who leave for foreign clubs now. They weren't doing it at the time. But it's a whole can of worms. It's a thing we don't, it's another part of the complexities of American soccer we don't get into. But I think most of it is just down. I preach this all the time. We already talked about patience. I think most of it is just down to kids being immersed in the game from a young age and being able to see it on television and then wanting to play more and then going out in the backyard and kicking the ball against the wall or whatever it is that keeps you going. I mean, can't tell you how much solo practice I did in all the sports I played. We didn't have a lot of kids doing that. It was you go play your youth soccer and you go home and that's it. There's no like living the game, sort of breathing the game. And that's obviously a big factor in just making a soccer player who can arrive at 17 and be ready to do something. So I think Adams and McKennie and Pulisic and Reyna, they're all examples of that. Reyna maybe less because, and Pulisic too, whose dad was a coach, because their dads were coaches. But a lot of these guys, they just, culturally, it matters more now. It didn't used to. I wanted to go play baseball or football because the guys I saw on television who were making millions of dollars for playing those sports. Now you don't have to go anywhere. You can see Ronaldo and Messi every weekend or the Premier League every weekend and see those guys making the money that they do and dreaming of that. So that helps.
So with this crop of players, which I personally think on sort of a mass level, as in you've got Pulisic, I feel like you've got more stars amongst your team right now than you have previously ever. I mean, before you had Landon Donovan, who was a star. And I wish he came over to England a lot earlier, and I wish he actually stayed there a lot longer.
Yeah.
But I think this is a better crop. So for me, it says that there's something that they're moving forward, and then hopefully the next generation, whether the next generation will be the next batch, we don't know, because it never really works like that. But
well, this is the argument. This is the discussion we're having right now, right? So we missed the World Cup, and that was a massive blow to the American soccer ego, because we had missed the World Cup since we went in 94 because we went in 90. We qualified for the first World Cup in 50 years in 90. We hadn't missed one since then. So to miss that World Cup out of a weak region, I mean, everybody knows CONCACAF is a terrible region. It's Mexico and maybe Costa Rica, and then that's pretty much it. So it was, why did this happen? Well, we had a gap. So the group that failed to qualify, they're all pushing 30 at the time. And you had Pulisic, who I think was 19 or 20 when he was trying to save that team effectively all on his own. Adams hadn't arrived. McKennie hadn't arrived. We were missing a bunch of pieces. So we had a massive gap. And I don't know why that you can chalk that up to a bunch of different things. The coach is not doing a good job integrating new players or whatever it is. The talent level we have now, man for man across a number of places, is much better. And you can throw in a Serginho Dest, who wasn't born and raised here, but is going to play for us and is a great talent out of Ajax. So we have man for man a better group of players. It's putting the players together and making a whole. And I think with England that this happens all the time. You have star player, and you put them on the field and it's like, well, why don't they work together? Like, what's happening here? And you can blame it on you can blame it on the coach. You can blame it on the manager if you want. And sometimes that's true. I think that sometimes managers just don't do a good job, but if you don't have a cohesive identity of who you are and what you're doing together, and I think we're still developing that, right? We used to have one because nobody respected us.
Yeah, so it's work as a team.
In 2002, you had to work as a team. We had a bunch of guys playing in MLS and in second division in Germany. Now we have guys that are playing in the best leagues in the world, but that sense of American identity is missing. I don't like to shake my fist at the sky and sound like an old man and say these kids these days, they don't understand it. But I think you'll talk to a lot of former internationals in the U.S. who will say the spirit isn't there. And again, whose fault is that is the question.
Yeah, well, yeah. For me, maybe. Look, if you've got the stars there and you're just talking about the spirit, then the coach best start getting out some history books and showing you what it's like to be an American. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Because if you're talking about, you've got this level of player who will be a much better level of player than, say, I don't know, another country out there that's actually an Iceland, for example. You've got a much better team than Iceland, and it's only the fact that you feel that the team spirit or the team bond is because one guy's in Germany, one guy's playing in Ajax, one guy's playing in here, and there's no unity. That's small fry, because the talent is the most important thing.
You'd rather have start with the talent and then work on the other things.
Yes,
than have the spirit and not have the talent.
Spirit can only take you so far.
It's true.
You can beat that talent to start liking each other and bond as a team a lot better, definitely. And once that clicks, then you've got something.
So you're saying that Germany and Brazil don't win World Cups because of their team spirit? That's what you're saying?
Well, are you saying that all the best German players play in Germany together? They managed to pull together and get it. So
Brazil, nobody plays in Brazil.
No one plays in Brazil, although the Brazilian leagues are getting a lot better. Okay. They must be starting to generate some money because people are going back there. I mean, Gerson, who was linked with Arsenal, he was at Inter Milan or Roma, and he's gone back to Brazil. So they must be doing something over there.
Yeah, maybe.
The US equal pay drama. Megan Rapinoe's standing tall, fighting for the rights of equal pay. Where do you stand on it?
I respect the fight absolutely, and I think that the whole thing is kind of predicated on this idea that you go into a legal venue and there are precedents and there are ways of looking at it, and again, in this case, the most recent event is that the judge in the case granted U.S. Soccer a partial judgment by saying that the U.S. women had the chance to take a different contract, one that would have paid them more in the end, and they chose not to. They decided to take guaranteed money over the potential money, and therefore their arguments could have been valid. And even though they didn't take that contract, they actually made more than the men. But then you start to kind of, if you unpack this and you kind of go back to the beginning, and we just talk about, look, we all grew up in a patriarchal society. I mean, I don't want to get too, I don't want to get too politics and sociology 101 here, but, I'm not going to claim to be an expert on feminism, but we all grew up in a patriarchal society where you were taught that boys play sports and girls play with dolls, right? So we that's like the basis for all of this. So when they say, when people cry out, the women don't bring in as much money, or not as many people watch the Women's World Cup, or whatever it is. Well, yeah, duh, because people have been told for generations that girls aren't allowed to play sports or shouldn't play sports, or they're pushed away from sports. And even then we still have this attitude pervading, but it's only in the last, I don't even know, 10 years that there's been an actual attempt to respect, especially women footballers, and say, wow, I can watch women play football and not need to compare it to anything else. Like, I don't have to sit there and go, yeah, this isn't Liverpool in the Champions League. Does it need to be? Because if I accept it for what it is, I can find entertainment out of it. Like, if you have a local club in the 4th division and you go out and you enjoy watching them play, does it make you a sucker because that's not Champions League football? No,
of course not.
It's not. No, it's what you decided to take out of it, right? Your passion, your love for it. And I think that because we have always said women should do different things than men, and because the investment wasn't there in the beginning, and I'm talking about going back 100 years to when football was in its infancy, you can't then say, well, the girls don't bring in as much money. I mean, again, everything is sort of built on that infrastructure that is unfair to begin with. You know what I'm saying? Like, everything's tilted to begin with. I understand, again, within the law of why that judge made his decision, and I understand that lawyers will tell you that was sort of not, if not the correct decision, a justifiable decision. But I completely respect the U.S. women's national team for saying, like, okay, fine, whatever this is, but you still don't treat us equally, right? You still don't come to the table and treat us as equals. You may say you're giving us the same sort of deal as the men, but everything that you give us is based on what the men were making before, with the idea that they're going to leapfrog us again, right? So, and this is just sort of the way things have always gone. If the women make a bunch more money in their next contract, the men are going to say, well, they got that. Give us 25, 30, 50% more because we're men. And that's just not, they might not say it that way, but it's always the implication. It's always sort of the subtext to any conversation about women's pay.
That's a great answer. I wasn't expecting that answer. It's a brilliant answer.
All right, I mean, I try. I mean, the thing is that it's complicated. Like, the legal part of it it's hard to follow.
It's so tough because I see it as I just think sometimes it's very dangerous with the money thing, especially in a situation that we're in now. If there was, I know it's more based on the women's national team, but if you're talking about equal pay in terms of the women's game as such, it's a dangerous time, because would they have been able to survive this situation that they're in now? Like, the men's game is barely surviving.
I'll say this, and their men's teams are going to suffer because of everything. It is tough to kind of figure out how to argue that a women's national team should be paid equally to the men's national team, while at the same time saying, well, okay, the leagues can't afford to pay the women. They're making nothing, essentially. They're making $60,000 a year, which is nothing. That's a rounding error in most Premier League contracts. They can't pay that. So you're not saying we'll pay them equally for their club contracts, because that money doesn't exist. But again, we need to get to a point of where we can recognize why it doesn't exist and try to fix that. So for example, in the United States, and I don't think this is necessarily the case in a place like England, although you do have clubs now that are changing hands and people are investing and they're coming in to try to make money. But in the United States, people will put down $500 million to start a soccer club because they want to have a soccer club, because they want to be in MLS, because they want to be part of the global community of football. They'll just drop that money, or they'll borrow it, or they'll get 10 people together to spend that money like it's nothing, right? And they'll build stadiums and whatever, and they'll go into massive debt, or they'll take on loans to do it. Why aren't people doing that for women's football? What is the reasoning? Like, literally, explain to me why somebody wouldn't say, okay, let's start a women's football club and do the same sort of investment. It might not cost you as much to get the best players in the world right now because the market is different, but go spend a bunch of money. Why are you willing to lose millions of dollars on men's football but not on women's football? What's the difference? Is it just about, is it just because men are supposed to play and women aren't? I don't know.
I'd say it's the boys' club mentality kind of thing. It's probably more of a showpiece for these rich guys to say, I own this, I own that. But if they actually are smart, they know that the women's game is growing so rapidly, and you'll be smart to try and find yourself the female Messi or the female Cristiano Ronaldo coming out soon.
The cynical view on this is and obviously, look, most of the people with that kind of money are men, so it's another thing we could talk about in terms of the nature of the world. But if you just want to look at it cynically, okay, you can be a hero, right? You can be sort of the Pied Piper of women's football. If you're the person that's got $1 billion in your bank account and you can say, I'm going to throw $50 million at this. Again, that's barely anything for the top men's teams in the world. But if you, and Lyon does this a little bit, I don't know exactly how they bankroll all of this, but they obviously spend some money on their women's club and they do a great job of it. If somebody would just say, I'm willing to lose this money on women's football the way they do on men's, then we can argue, then we can actually have a conversation about equality and trying to make it work. Because right now we can't. It's not even remotely the level playing field.
No, it's not. You're right. Besides Reina, who are the most exciting players coming out of America for you?
Oh, man. Well, let's see. Right now, I mean, there's a couple of players in Major League Soccer. Okay, I'm not going to say I'm more excited than obviously Reina is extremely exciting. I'm high on Josh Sargent at Werder Bremen, but he's obviously got a tough situation right now. They're in a relegation fight with the league restarting. He's been behind some legends. He's had to share time. He's only 19. He came straight out of the United States. He wasn't in a professional club academy. He was in one of those youth academies in St. Louis before he signed with them. I think he's going to be good, but I don't know how soon it's going to happen. In Major League Soccer, there are a couple of players, a couple of them at FC Dallas, which is where, again, McKennie was for a while. Paxton Pomykal, who's a midfielder at some point, and it wasn't me, okay? Somebody wrote an article comparing him to Frankie de Jong. I'm not saying he's Frankie de Jong, okay? I'm not saying he's Frankie de Jong, but
big fish to fill.
Yeah. He's not going to end up at Barcelona anytime soon. Okay, that's a guarantee. But he's talented enough to play in Europe if he wants to, and we're going to see if he can continue to grow. He also has a killer mustache going on right now. I don't know why, but that's what he's decided to do with his life.
Why are people bringing that back?
I don't know. I don't know. It's a move. It's definitely a move. And then the other one at FC Dallas is Reggie Cannon, who's a right back. Okay. I think he's 20 now. Again, he's had some interest. I think there are a couple of Premier League and German clubs who have been looking at him. So we see if he gets an opportunity. He's an incredibly bright kid, just off the charts intelligent. Seems to be extremely mature for his age. Just got married at 20 or 21, which is interesting too. I mean, for Reggie. So yeah, so a couple of names coming out. There are others, but I don't want to. I don't go.
Yeah, Alex Mendes at Ajax. Have you seen him?
There's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one.
He's a good. I like watching them kind of players. Just cool on the ball, turns, step over, 3 legs, see you later. That kind of guy.
Another one in Germany, there's a lot of them in Germany, Ulisses Janes at Wolfsburg. He's probably not ready for the first team yet, like Mendes, still playing in the youth club, the youth teams, but very, very good. Very, very good forward, can score a bunch of goals. So look out for him too. Yeah.
I'll ask my my guy who's like a Dutch expert to keep an eye out for Mendes. With the Bundesliga starting, who is your team? Who are you supporting?
Man, that's what everybody's talking about right now. How do you pick a team? So I will say that just to kind of explain with this thought process, I do not have a Premier League team. I don't support anybody in particular. And I never found a connection. Like over here, obviously you get people say, well, my granddad was based in whatever, or my grandmother's from, I don't know, from the Midlands. So I root for from whatever club, I don't have those connections, so I never found myself rooting for anybody particularly. But I did, I had a soft spot for Fulham during the Full America days? Of course I did.
Brian McBride?
Dempsey, McBride, Bocanegra was there.
Uh-huh.
A couple other guys were there. Eddie Lewis, I think, was there.
Yeah.
So I liked them. So I do gravitate towards the club with Americans. The problem in Germany is that a lot of clubs have Americans. So I'm going to have to pick somebody. I think Dortmund is the choice. I'm most excited about Reina. That club culture is fantastic.
Yeah.
There's so many things I like about Dortmund. Obviously, Pulisic was there, so I was rooting for him and supporting what he was doing because we hadn't had an American on that stage. So I think it's going to end up being Dortmund, but I could be swayed to another club. I like Tyler Adams a lot too, but I know that the supporting Leipzig is like.
I'm Leipzig.
Are you?
What? Go on, carry on. What, go on.
It's a sin. If you talk to a German football fan, it's a sin.
Oh
to
yeah, that's
Leipzig.
because they came up from out of nowhere, like
because Red Bull owns them, even though they're not supposed to own them.
They're not. They changed the name to RB and changed the badge. I get it. But we've seen Man City, Man United have loads of money. Yeah, they've got.
I know, but I think it's close. I think it's closer. It's closer to MK Dons and that whole thing. Like I know,
but look where they are. So it's not as easy as you think.
It's karma. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
MK Dons are still down there scrapping.
Yeah.
They're never going to be anywhere near.
And Wimbledon's got a new club, right? AFC Wimbledon. I don't know where they are.
And they're actually. I think they've overtaken them now. I think they've overtaken them.
That definitely is coming.
They started again.
Yeah.
With the Bundesliga starting, or just any league that's either looking to start or making moves towards setting a safe environment, do you feel like they're rushing it? Do you think football's ready yet?
Man, I don't know. I don't know. I think it's unfair for me to say that they're rushing it when I don't know specifically what's going on in Germany. I mean, I can read news reports and I can see that they've got it under relative control. I know that there's like a whole set of steps that players have to go through. They're basically quarantined for a week before they even play the game. Lots of testing, lots of that. So I'm going to say no in terms of it being rushed, only because I think they understand the gravity of it, right? They understand how, and we do need that. When I say we, I mean everybody. I imagine there are people who don't care about sports or like whatever, but we do need something. And it's interesting to see, American fans sort of, and I don't know if this is true across all of the whole country or sports fans in general, because obviously there are people here who don't care at all about soccer. It's interesting though to see people get at least intrigued by the Bundesliga. So I'm gonna say no to rushing it. I just am scared. Like I'm just worried about it because I guess my concern is if something happens, if there's an outbreak, they shut the whole thing down, then everybody else is kind of going to step back, right? The Premier League is going to have to say, whoa, hold up, we can't do this either. Major League Soccer is talking about playing all of their games in Orlando this summer as their plan, which is
really?
I think the Premier League had a thought about World Cup style camps, but then playing around the country. MLS, because it's a big country and because you don't need fans in the stands, they're just going to play all their games on like a complex, which who knows if that's a good idea. I honestly don't know.
That sounds like a bowl of Corona. It doesn't sound too great.
If you block it out and make sure it doesn't get in, then it's fine. It works. True. Now, obviously, again, that's the Bundesliga is trying to control for those variables too. So I don't know. My thing isn't about whether they're rushing back to play soccer. My thing is that this isn't going to feel right. It just can't. And I don't know if that means we shouldn't do it or they shouldn't do it. I don't know, because what is the game with nobody in the building watching the game? What is the game with no supporters? Especially in a place like Germany where that culture. Yeah.
It's massive. But it's just if they're talking about potentially for the rest of the year there's going to be no fans, how long do you leave it? Do you leave it until there's a vaccine? At what point is it safe to then have fans? Or I feel like it sounds a bit because I'm a football head, but the world needs football.
Right? Yeah, no, it's true. I agree.
At least I've got friends that were watching the Belarusian league 2 weeks after shutdown. Yeah. And now they're pining for anything. I just saw a goal the other day from the South Korean league with a back heel, and I'm thinking maybe this could be the new place to watch football. So you never know. I think we just want to watch something. And we just hope to God that it's safe and that no one gets anything from it. It seems like they're putting all the parameters in place with regards to testing people. I mean, I know they found 3 players the other day. They've been isolated. So it's showing that they are putting the parameters in place, and you don't know until you try.
We are so conditioned, I think, now in the modern world to kind of assume the worst intentions on the part of everybody who's in charge. I mean, FIFA's corrupt as hell. UEFA's corrupt all the way through. Everybody in the Premier League is chasing a pound or whatever. Everybody, it's always about money. And so it's easy for us to go, well, this is about money. They're just rushing it back because they're losing so much money or they want to make money. But at the same time, that can be true as much as it is we need football and maybe it's okay to try. And what are the players going to do? This is their life, right? This is all they know. Are you going to tell them sit at home and don't ever play football again, or wait for 2 years while we vaccinate every single person on the planet?
That will be a disaster. Like, think of the talent. Think of the talent that is potentially coming through. Right? It's going to be missing out because we're in a situation where, I don't know, the world has come to a halt, which is pretty sad for some of them players.
It feels like football shouldn't be a priority.
No.
But also I want it to be a priority because I miss it, right?
Yeah. When it comes to football, we're selfish creatures.
We are. No,
it can't be helped. It can't be helped. We think that everyone wants it, everyone needs it, but when I click on BT Sport and all I can see is Raw with 2 guys in a ring wrestling, I don't know how much of that I could actually watch. And even that's weird with no one in the stands and it's echoey and it's just a bit.
Yeah, you're going to learn some German curse words, I think, coming up soon.
I'm going to have to because I need to know what they're saying. I'm going to learn some curse words. I'm going to know every single player in the Bundesliga by the end of
it.
Absolutely. Because there's nothing else, and also some South Korean players, or the best ones at least.
There you go. I admit I haven't done anything with South Korea yet. Haven't taken a look at that league. I'm gonna have to try. I think Go ahead.
One way to entice you, maybe just to look Wonder Goal South Korea, and you'll see the goal. That will maybe give you a little inkling to what they're playing with.
Okay, all right. I'll watch for that.
Have a little look.
South Korea Bundesliga. Okay.
All right, that is it. It went pretty fast for me. I don't know how it was for you.
No, perfect. That was awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Had a blast.
Could you just tell all the watchers they're not watching now, but they'll be watching later on, about your platform, your Twitter, Insta handles, everything? Go.
All right. So I do a daily radio show in the United States. If anybody happens to get to the United States or has access, it's on satellite radio, Sirius XM. It's called the United States of Soccer because I just like to be on the nose with these kind of things. That's on every day from noon to 3 p.m. Eastern time. And then I've got a podcast that I do with a friend of mine that I've been doing. Well, we brought back an old podcast under a different name. It's called JD and the Rod. It's football, it's soccer, but it's American
funny.
focus.
It's funny. Please watch it. Please. And I just want to say it's aluminium, not aluminum.
That came up in the last show, so I know you watched, definitely.
Did my research.
That was absolutely fun. We just have a good time. They, take the piss out of everything, to use a phrase. And then Davis, DAVISJSN on Twitter and on Instagram. And yeah, that's probably it for now. I might have new stuff coming up in the near future. So just watch the handles and I'll drop some new projects.
100%. We'd love to get you on a pod one day and tell the world about the MLS.
Sounds brilliant. When we're playing again, you got to get the games back. Yeah. But Bundesliga, right?
Bundesliga, Leipzig.
Yeah. Yes. There you go.
And find an English team. I want to find you an English team.
Okay, so very quickly, I've flirted with Villa. Okay, I think I dodged a bullet, but I flirted with Villa. Guzan was there. We might have had another player there at one point. I've flirted with Arsenal. I've been turned off by Arsenal fans. I'm sorry. The fans.
No. If I had a choice, if I could go back, I may pick another team just because of our fan base.
I have a lot of friends in the States who are Arsenal fans. It makes me want to support them at the same time. I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what's wrong with you.
I don't know what happened to us. I don't know. Self-entitlement too much. I don't like it.
Yeah. I don't think there's anybody else that's kind of even come close. But
Does
I
it
might
have
get
to have
there.
an American in the team?
No, no, not necessarily. I've moved past that. I've matured as a fan. I think I can. I mean, I like the way Liverpool plays, and I like Klopp. Those are things I like. Those things individually. I love Sadio Mane. Who doesn't? If you're not playing against him, but that doesn't mean I want to be a Liverpool fan, right? That's an extra level.
It needs a connection. Maybe you got to try a team that's lower league.
Maybe.
How important is the style of football or how good the football is?
Well, I don't want to watch Drek. I don't want to watch 10 men behind the ball. I'm sorry.
Don't worry. I'm going to find you a team. Now I know the parameters, what you filtered out. I'm going to find you a team.
Okay.
Next time we talk, I'll have a team for you. All right,
I'm
cool. Thank you very much, Jason. Take care.
Thank you.
Well, it's not the last time we're going to see Jason. I'm hoping so. Great guy. And we'd definitely like to get him on a pod one time. How about if you've got any players that you're interested in hearing about from Jason with regards to youth development, youth teams, whatever. If you've got any questions for Jason about the MLS, just write in the comments and we'll have that prepared for him next time. As I said, we've got to choose a team for him. They've got to have some form of history, play decent football, and have a fan base that he might enjoy being around. I think he's forgetting this is England. It's not going to be that easy. But anyway, like I said, this is not the last time we're going to see him, and hopefully I get an invite onto the JD and Rod show. Jason, don't make me beg. There's so much more content coming on the channel. We've got interviews from journalists from Africa, from Ghana and Nigeria. They're coming out soon. We've also got an interview with Adam Brandon, the full interview from South American expert, with Callum McFadden from CFB Football. So much. I'm excited. We're also, just remember guys, this channel is all football. So we're going to be bringing you youth from all over the world. We're going to tell you the biggest gems out there. We're going to show you players you've never heard or seen of before. And I'm sure you're going to love them all. But even if you don't, it gives you something else to think about. So make sure you tune in, subscribe and like. Share it with your mates. Get it out there because you want to be the one who was the first to follow KS1 TV and of course the Transfer Exchange. On that note, peace out, stay safe and wash your hands.